The Opposition Leader Anthony Albanese joins me live from Parliament House. Thank you for being with us.
Good morning, Leigh. Good afternoon, evening. It's
been
a long day.
You've been using the term the Morrison recession recently. You used it again in your speech tonight. Australians aren't stupid. They see what's happening globally. Who do you think believes it's all Scott Morrison's fault?
Well, Scott Morrison referred to the Keating recession today in Parliament repeatedly. He's the Prime Minister, and the fact is...
Well, you're the opposition leader. Address the question. Who do you think believes it's Scott Morrison's fault?
Well, the fact is that it is Scott Morrison, who's Prime Minister and was Treasurer, who presided over an economy that was weak going into the pandemic. And if you look at what was happening last year in terms of growth was so low, the only thing that was keeping growth going was population increase. We had wage stagnation, we had business investment falling, we had productivity going backwards. There was a productivity recession last year. That's one of the concerns that we have. And then this year, of course, Scott Morrison was very reluctant and slow to introduce wage subsidies. He opposed it when Labor was first suggesting it. And Scott Morrison's the Prime Minister. There's nothing unusual about describing something that happens in government by the name of the leader at that particular time.
Well, the economy would be in exactly the same recession if Bill Shorten were the Prime Minister.
Well, the fact is that we would have had a very different economic program. We had a plan for economic growth. We weren't successful. The government was elected last May, and then what you had was the Reserve Bank continually intervening to lower interest rates and use monetary policy, calling upon the government repeatedly to use fiscal policy, to invest in infrastructure, to do something to grow the economy. They didn't have a plan then, and they don't have much of a plan now in terms of this budget.
You've announced tonight that you'll spend billions of dollars on further government spending on childcare. Governments have three ways they can pay for things: raising taxes, cutting spending, or borrowing money. How would you pay for your childcare plan?
Well, all of our commitments will be fully funded by the time the election comes. We'll announce all of that program. One of the things about childcare, Leigh, is that it's not just money out, it's money in as well. And the estimates from KPMG and from the Grattan Institute and others is that investing in childcare actually provides substantial growth. If you look at the Grattan Institute, it's $7 to $10 billion, KPMG at least $4 billion. And the thing is, if you're about growing the economy, the three Ps are population, productivity and participation. Good policy on childcare is about increasing participation, but it's also about boosting productivity that helps produce returns to the government. This is a substantial economic reform, Leigh. This isn't about welfare. This is about a substantial economic reform, recognising that we need to use the talents of our entire population, and that includes women and men.
Well, on the point about women and the talents of the whole population, if you care about that, why in your childcare policy tonight is there no mention of an increase in wages for childcare workers, mostly women and some of the hardest working and most underpaid members of the community?
I actually did mention that tonight, Leigh, in my speech.
Well, how much will they be getting their wages increased
very early
by?
on. Well, what we're not doing is announcing a full comprehensive policy on every single issue tonight, Leigh. This is a budget reply speech, not an alternative budget. And the area where we thought the biggest priority was in increasing participation, in removing the disincentive that's there for women who often, and it can be men as well, of course, provide so that they lose 80 or 90 or 100% of their income if they work more than 3 days. That is a massive inefficiency in our economy. It's one that should be addressed. It's one that has been identified by economists of how you grow the economy. This is low-hanging fruit. And the government should have said something about it this week. We also need to use...
Sorry, just on the point about the 3 days, if somebody needs childcare for 5 days, under what you're proposing tonight, it looks like childcare will be mostly not means tested. Doesn't that go against the progressive nature of our system, so that somebody on $50,000 a year is going to be paying the same roughly for 5 days of childcare as somebody on $500,000 a year?
Well, that's not right. In terms of the benefits will be substantially for people on low and middle incomes will still receive 4 times the benefit of people on higher incomes from what we're proposing. But we don't see this as a welfare measure, Leigh. We think that there are substantial advantages by having not just low-income women, but middle income, higher income as well. I announced tonight that what we envisage doing is having in our first term the 90% figure, and it would taper down in a straight line to $530,000. So that would be the upper limit. But I announced tonight that we'd ask the Productivity Commission to look at a review of how it's operating in our first term and to consider whether you make that universal. Just like if someone needs health care, when there was a report there about, you just had about James Packer, when Kerry Packer had a heart attack, he ended up in Royal Prince Alfred Hospital public section. He got the same care. And that's part of the benefit of having a universal healthcare system. Superannuation is universal. Our schools, anyone can send their kids to a public school. The fact is that childcare should be regarded as an essential service. You should deal with the tax system in a whole range of other ways by having a progressive tax system, but when it comes to childcare, it shouldn't be seen as a welfare measure. This is economic reform which will boost productivity.
The Morrison government's overhaul of university student fees is set to become law, doubling the price of humanities degrees. Will Labor overturn that in office?
Well, we oppose the legislation, Leigh.
That's not the same as whether you'll overturn it in office.
Well, we'll make our announcements at the appropriate time.
But the principle...
Tonight's not the time. The principle is that we support education as something that benefits not just individuals, but benefits the society as a whole.
But if you think it's unjust, why wouldn't you say tonight and we'll undo that?
Because I'm about, as we were tonight, in terms of our childcare policy, we put out a fully costed policy tonight attached to that. And we'll make our announcements at the appropriate time.
You said it was fully costed, but when I asked you about it earlier, you said you'd release your full funding by the election.
No, we put out how much it would cost.
You didn't say how you'd pay for it.
We'll put it... Well, Leigh, it's not... what you don't have is for every policy an attachment to it. What you have is a series of expenditures, a series of savings. That's how budgets work. It's not hypothecated. You have a program that we will make very clear prior to the election. But quite frankly, Leigh, this government that has just produced $1 trillion of debt without a single bit of reform to show for it. Where's the big change in the economy that will drive future productivity? There's not even, in this week's budget, a major infrastructure project from this government. You have $1 trillion of debt and no reform legacy. What happened when Paul Keating presided over the last time that there was a recession is that compulsory superannuation, a major reform that's proved to be a ballast for our economy, has assisted working people to actually own a bit of the game, have a share of the economy, and which has helped provide with that $3 trillion a massive source of funding for investment in new infrastructure. That was a change that happened. This government has just set up a series of pots. We've seen a whole range of waste. One of the things we wouldn't do, here's a save, we won't buy land around Badgerys Creek for $33 million that's only worth $3 million. We won't provide for the Barrier Reef Foundation over $400 million. We won't have a sports rorts program. They're the sort of saves that we'll have for a start. But we'll announce our entire program well before the next election.
We're out of time. Anthony Albanese, thank you.
Thanks very much, Leigh.